Konnichiwa, Nihon Cricket Pod to yokoso. Hello and welcome to the Japan Cricket Podcast. My name's Alan Kerr and I'm your host, and on this episode I have a really special guest. For those who don't know, Robbie Deans is the current head of rugby for the Panasonic Wild Knights based in Saitama. Since taking charge, they have won 5 of the last 8 titles, including the last 2. Now, what is a guy like that doing on my podcast? Fair question. Here's a little background. I arrived in Japan in early 2014 and eventually joined my local gym. A couple of weeks in and I had a conversation with a guy playing squash who told me that Robbie Deans had been on the squash courts the previous week. Needless to say, I just assumed that I'd misunderstood him, and since my Japanese was even worse than it is now, if you can believe that, I promptly dismissed it. A month or two later, I became aware that Robbie had indeed taken up the head of rugby position at the Wild Knights, who were based around 45 minutes away. So when I saw a bloke in his 50s thrashing around on the squash court, I was quite taken aback to realise it was indeed the same person who had just been coaching the Wallabies against the British and Irish Lions the previous summer, a series that I had followed very closely before I moved to Japan. I suddenly realised I was stood behind the glass door of the squash courts in my British and Irish Lions shirt, which perhaps might not have been the best way to endear myself, so I swiftly moved on. The next day, I decided to see if I could contact Robbie and went on to panasonic.jp and found an email address for the rugby team fan club, and I sent the following email. This is a message for head coach Mr. Robbie Deans. I have seen Mr. Deans at the Central Sports Gym in Sano and recently, and I work for the Japan Cricket Association, and wondered if he would be interested in getting together to discuss opportunities in sport, particularly in Japan. My contact details are below. If Mr. Deans would like to contact me, I would be very grateful. I had zero expectations of getting a reply, but the following day I got a notification on my Line account, which said, Robbie Deans has added you as a friend online. And within a month, we had him into the JCA office. From there, I've played squash with Robbie semi-regularly, at least until COVID came along, and also had him over a number of times to see the cricket grounds in Sano and play in the annual Embassy Cup for the Anzac team. He has also invited us to the Wild Knights facilities, both the old ones in Ota and the brand new facility in Kumagaya, which is certainly worth a visit for anyone who can get there, as it's fully open to the public, even when the team are training. We even ran a cricket day for the Panasonic team as part of their team building sessions, something Robbie remains keen to do again. This chat follows the basic formula of most of these episodes, but takes some really interesting tangents, which I hope you all enjoy. I really felt this episode was one that was worth putting out relatively unedited. So, as ever, if you have any feedback or would like to give it a review, that would be really appreciated, either on your podcast platform or on the Japan Cricket Podcast Instagram page. All right, here's Robbie. Robbie Deans, welcome to the Japan Cricket Podcast.
Thank you, Alan.
I'll give you an easy one to start with, mate. What came first, rugby or cricket?
That's a good question, actually. Probably rugby on the back lawn with my brother, informally, and down the hallway.
Yeah.
But to be fair, both played equally a significant part in our upbringing. We played sport all year round. Having a brother within a year of you, it was probably inevitable. We just competed at anything, really.
Yeah, right. So that may as well go straight back to the start then. So why don't you tell us where you were born and brought up?
Sure. Basically 90 minutes north of Christchurch, a place called Cheviot, which is still about the same size now as it was then. It's very small. There's an area school there, and there's a shop for refreshments. But if you weren't stopping for refreshments, you'd be through it very quickly and you may not notice it. But we didn't live in Cheviot. My father farmed, and we were quite isolated where we were the first pickup and the last drop-off for the bus. So it was an hour-long round trip for us each way to get to school and back, and we had to cycle a significant distance to get to the meeting point for the bus in the first instance. So we're pretty isolated.
It kept you fit?
Yeah, well, we're active on the farm, active in terms of, as a family, we had 5 children under 5 years of age. So my mother was the national figure skating champion at the age of 22, and by the age of 27, she had 5 children. So
wow,
we had a lot of fun. We created our own fun, and sport was a big part of that. And ultimately, once we started playing sport within the district, sport was a very big part of the community. It was what brought the community together, and obviously country people do tend to gather around that sort of reason, and it's very important to.
So sorry, I'm just going to go back. I didn't realise that you were one of 5. I'm actually one of 5 as well. but I'm the runt of the litter. I'm the youngest. So where do you sit in the five?
Smack in the middle.
Smack in the middle.
Two elder sisters, and then my brother, and then the younger sister.
Younger sister as well. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it's, that community sport, it's vital, isn't it? In areas like that, where homes are spread out and people are, distances apart, you need a reason to get together. And more often than not, sport is that reason. So I guess you mentioned community events, but schools as well. So was there specific events that got held into school things or into community things that would bring people together that you really stand out in your memory?
Yes, for the very first one, that's really what lashed me on to rugby in particular. Was there was under 5 stone 7 tournament up at Colvin and Waiau on a field that was sloped, so there was a significant advantage playing downhill. But what I remember about it was all my mates from school, we got thrown into this combination, had many games across the course of a day. And, your parents are obligated to drive you there, obviously, so they're watching, and that's great. And there's the opportunity to eat and drink the sort of food that you don't get access to living off the farm.
Yeah, right.
In between times. So the whole thing was just a festival. And the team element of that was just a thrill as a kid to be part of. And that's what really latched us on in the first instance.
So, I'm just going to go back. You mentioned your mum was a figure skating champion. How much of an influence was she then in terms of for you and your brother as you guys went down that professional sporting avenue? Was she a driver, or did she kind of take a back seat and just let you kind of go?
No, her parents were very supportive. Other than the genetics, obviously, but they just encouraged us, really. She wasn't particularly local, but yeah, they certainly supported, and obviously it involved a lot of travel.
Yeah.
For us to be engaged in the game or any game. So, and my father played cricket locally for the local cricket club, and we got exposed to that and watching that, supporting that. And obviously that also was something that we enjoyed and aspired to repeat, I guess.
Yeah, great. And were there any particular sporting heroes that you had at the time that kind of inspired you to base your playing style on, or you wanted to be like, and possibly ended up playing with or against later on?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the era of, Canterbury won the Renfrew Shield during that era. And for those that don't know, the Renfrew Shield is a format. It's a trophy that you only defend at home when you're the current holder. And it was probably the preeminent trophy in New Zealand rugby at that point. They didn't have a national championship. So we were very aware. Canterbury picked it up, won it off Hawke's Bay. And to be honest, when we were really young, we didn't have a TV. We acquired one along the way. But we weren't really watching live sport in that period. So we used to listen to these fixtures standing in the bus queue. I remember Fergie McCormick kicking a drop goal to retain the Renfrew Shield against South Canterbury. And then this word of mouth, Alex Wiley was playing in that team. He also played for Glenmark, the first club that we played for in the under-11s. So he was wearing the same colours as us, and we'd stay on and watch him play. And from there, he went on a tour in 1970 to South Africa. So we were able to watch him play at our same colours that we'd see on our washing line after we'd played. And that just intrigued us. We thought, in that era, national players had a presence around the club. So that was a great source of inspiration and possibility for us. We thought, if they can do it from here, maybe we can.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, isn't it, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely.
So then you're playing both sports as you grow up. Was it very much rugby in the winter, cricket in the summer?
Yeah, cricket for us, playing-wise, other than against each other in the backyard, didn't really happen until we got to school, to be honest. And we were sent away for what they call a preparatory school because of our relative isolation. And it was there that we really got exposed to organised cricket. We'd watched cricket with my father. He was an avid cricketer, and he used to go down and watch cricket at Lancaster Park. So we'd obviously go with him. We weren't as engaged in the game, but we'd hear all the stories and aware of people like Vic Pollard, Brian Hastings, Peter Coleman in particular, opened the batting at that point. I think he might have had 1 or 2 games for New Zealand, but predominantly for Canterbury. And he was a very exciting batsman. So my father had to be there for the first ball. He was ahead of his time, really. He didn't want to miss the first couple of overs because a lot could happen in those. Subsequent to that, guys like Glenn Turner, we witnessed his 2 centuries against Australia for the first domestic win over Australia in New Zealand. Ken Wadsworth was part of that group. So, yeah, we're more aware than involved through our formative years in cricket. But then once we got to secondary school, we got sent away to boarding school, and that's when we really latched onto the game, because if you weren't studying or if you weren't in class, you'd be playing these games on the backyard or on a nearby field. And there's access to lots of other kids who had the same passion for the games.
So there's that when you found both your rugby and your cricket became a bit more serious and you started to...
That's when it flourished, I guess. When you got the chance to actually represent the team and play in full encounters that had meaning.
So which accelerated quicker, your rugby or your cricket at that point?
Well, at that point, pretty much both equal, maybe cricket slightly ahead because I was physically a bit of a late developer. It wasn't until my later years of secondary school that my body sort of caught up with my brain in terms of enthusiasm for the game. But there's no shortage of opportunity. So in terms of representative teams, I probably played more representative cricket through my school days than I did rugby. But then rugby kicked in at the latter end and probably took over it. It was more like the management, what you're exposed to and the opportunities that present themselves.
Which opportunity comes first? Yeah, I've had that chat with one of our boys over in Australia. Actually, he's very much sort of, he plays his cricket in his AFL, and it's a case of, well, whichever doors open first tend to be the ones you go down.
Yes.
And so you're predominantly a batter?
Yes. Wicket kept a little, bowled a little, mainly when I was captain.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah.
You and I have chatted in the past, and you tell me that you do have a first-class century to your name. So I can't find any evidence of this anywhere. So you'll have to tell me the story, and perhaps this will be its official recording.
Well, there's a good reason why you couldn't find it, because it's not listed as a first-class century. I think I was talking about the way it felt.
Yeah, fair enough.
I got selected for Canterbury only once. On one occasion, it was an early season game, and it was against Otago at Waimate in the south. And the game was washed out. So all I actually did on that occasion, it was just after we won the Ranfurly Shield, actually, and I was playing fullback for Canterbury. So all I did on that occasion was sit on the bench next to Richard Hadley and sign autographs. But interestingly, at the end of the year, I got sent a check because a friend of mine, Vaughan Brown, had won Player of the Day. I didn't backfield or bowl. He won Player of the Day. And then in that time, all of those winnings were divvied out. So I received a check for $17.98 at the end of that year, which I framed. I've never banked it because it would have made me a professional, which would have taken me out of rugby.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah.
To give you the real story about the first class century that I was probably alluding to was for Canterbury Country or North Canterbury in that time, which is a minor association which used to play in what was Hawke Cup cricket, they called it at that point. So I was lucky enough to play for them and played in some, to me, were significant fixtures. We challenged against Northland one year, but I think it was the end of that 82 year, actually. But ultimately, I only had about 10 innings for that team. I came back after and rugby took over at that point. I came back after my rugby career finished just to sort of prove to myself, I could have done something in the game.
Yeah, it's a bit more forgiving on the body playing cricket, isn't it? So you can play a little bit longer.
Yeah, so came back, and that might be the century I was alluding to, actually.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I guess, as you said, you had to make a call, I guess, once you've got these opportunities in cricket to potentially play in a professional setup, and the rugby you're already playing fullback for Canterbury was a pretty easy choice by that point.
Yeah, one ruled the other out because the demands were such that you couldn't do both. And eventually they basically regulated on it because each code tended to become protective, which I think is wrong. I think the cross-pollination is fantastic. And most players, as you've seen recently, well, you may not be aware, but there's an annual fixture between All Blacks and All Whites, well, predominantly ex-All Blacks and All Whites, which draws a lot of interest and is living proof of how both sporting codes and players from both codes can turn their hands to either. The rugby team, I think, are ahead 3-2 at the moment. We actually played a couple of those. In fact, the last one I played in was at Leggett, where we beat the All Whites team. They were a pretty reasonable combination. They had guys like Ian Smith, Ken Rutherford, Dion Nash, who had just come back from his debut in England, where he took 5-4 and made 50 at Lords. Richard Hadley, Lance Cairns, a couple of Webbs. It was a good combination. They scored 324 and we ran them down. We got them. Got a ton that day by chance.
Felt pretty good.
Well, it was a great occasion. I don't know if it's still happening, but, it's like sporty people love to rub shoulders and share stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andy Earl was in that game and was getting tight at the end, and his reputation was of being tough at rugby. He refused to put his pads on because Dion was in full flight because the game was tight. And I said to him, mate, what are you doing? And he said, well, if I don't put pads on, he might slow down.
Brave. So, yeah, I mean, you touched on that there. You and I know each other mainly from hitting balls on a squash court. So it's not just been rugby or cricket for you, right? You've played a number of different sports. And how do you think that has helped you as a sportsman first, but going later on as a coach as well?
It helps you enormously. There's a lot of elements that cross over between codes. And the most important one is the mental side. So the more experiences that you get of competing and succeeding, and more importantly, of failing, you develop the muscle that's between your ears. And ultimately, that is probably the most important muscle, and something that's misunderstood by the next generation of players. They arrive and they think it's all very much about the physical and that they have this unique talent. But over time, they come to learn that actually the muscle between their ears is the most important one. And it's your ability to keep going, to adapt, and work with the people around you that is the point of difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. Those experiences you have, the more you play, whatever it is, a 40-minute game of squash, you're dealing with winning and losing and how you manage that. It's a lot easier than just the every week, because you're getting multiple experiences, right, throughout a Monday to Friday, whatever it is.
Yep. Squash is a great game for that. Yep.
So yeah, you obviously played in the amateur era. So what was that like? And what did you do alongside your rugby when you were playing?
Predominantly, when I was playing for Canterbury, I was actually a qualified teacher. Rugby got in the way of that. I ultimately never taught other than coaching, possibly. But my brother and I were working on my father's farm. So for that early period of Canterbury success with the Shield, we were working there, which was challenging because it was a 90-minute drive each way from the farm. If you're on the back of the farm, you could be looking at 2 hours. So as amateurs, it was demanding. Everyone had day jobs, but to be honest, those day jobs, particularly through that era of the Bradfield Shield Challenges, where there was so much interest in the community, it was actually great to get away from it and to have something else in your life that provided a balance, and it helped cope with that scrutiny and those demands. So yeah, qualified teacher, but farms. I had also had a business, a distribution business, and ultimately sold that, and then did some consultancy around a couple of, New Zealand Up and Peerboard and Ernest Adams, a couple of brands you may know. I redesigned their distribution networks. At the far end of my career, I was doing that. But yeah, many and varied things.
Yeah, it's a whole different sort of lifestyle to what it is nowadays, right? Where people kind of talent ID at 16 and don't go to uni and they're straight into the sport, and they don't tend to have any kind of career up until their sport finishes. And we could probably touch on this in a bit later, but in Japan, you're employed by the company, so you might go and do whatever it is for Panasonic or whoever. But
yeah, that's the element that I quite enjoy about Japan. So I haven't done the numbers lately, but it was about 50-50 split between those who have a day job, those that go to the office when they're not training, and the professionals in the group. So it's a blast from the past. And it's a great earthing mechanism within the team. It makes both people accountable in terms of, for the professionals, there's no excuse for them not knowing their content. They've got nothing else to think about. But likewise, they actually need some balance in their lives so that they do have something else to think about. Otherwise, they don't cope when things go south. When things aren't going well, they tend to become obsessed with that one element of their lives. They lack the balance to cope. So, yeah, it's a good mix. And I enjoy that about the circumstance in Japan.
Yeah, right. So then what about injuries? I'm kind of curious, again, these days, I came in to see the new facility the other day, and, the gym and the training area for your guys is pretty impressive. And I'm assuming you didn't have anything like that when you were coming through as a player.
Hell no. Yeah, so you became quite independent because you relied on yourself to manage, because injuries were part of the sport. I'd ruptured an ACL and had to rehabilitate myself while I was working, which is challenging. But ultimately, as I tell my blokes now, at the end of the day, it's actually what you do for yourself that is point of difference. some young fellas think that if they turn up at the designated hour and lie on the physio's table, that all life will be sweet. Same as playing the game. It's what you do between trainings, what you do between sessions that defines and determines what you achieve. In other words, you need to master your own circumstance, understand your needs, and make the necessary steps to get them done and to ensure that you present yourself ready. And that hasn't changed, whether it be amateur or professional. The fact you're paid to do it is irrelevant. It's what you do that counts.
Yeah, coaches and S&Cs and physios and the rest can guide, right, and can give as much direction, but the accountability comes down to the individual.
Yeah, because they're so well supported now, totally supported. They get nutritionists that help them with diet. At the end of the day, if you eat what's designated in the clubhouse, but then you leave that facility and you eat some rubbish in between, you're only as good as the lesser of the inputs. And same as the team, it's only as good as its weakest link. And that's owned by individuals.
Yeah, for sure. I can't brush over your playing career completely and move on to your coaching career without at least talking about your time with the All Blacks. Playing rugby at that level for the most famous rugby team in the world must be, pretty special memories from that time. Yeah,
absolutely. It's interesting. I had this conversation just last night, actually, about the experiences that you enjoy and the meaning within them. Yes, it's very meaningful to be selected for your nation. And I have some fantastic memories of that, particularly because in our group, there was a large number from my provincial combination because we were successful through that period. So that made it more personal. But the reality is, yes, there's meaning in terms of international selection, but when you look at the total experience, when you wind the clock right back, there's nothing more personal than ultimately schoolboy rugby, where you represent your first 15, you know everybody, not only in the team, but on the sideline and parents. And then you go up to provincial if you're lucky. It's still personal, but you don't know everyone who takes an interest. And then you go to international. It's a broader scrutiny, if you like. So yes, the highs can be very high, but it's also got an element of scrutiny that can make it less personal and tough. But they're all good. The key is to be up for them no matter what the level and maximise that experience. And I was very lucky to play, I ruptured ACL, which impacted on my national career probably, but I was lucky to continue to play provincially and at club level for a long time. And have lots of memories as a result.
Yeah, I had a quick look and it looked like there was about 7 years or so between you wrapping up your playing and taking on the Crusaders coaching job.
Correct.
So what did you do in that time? Were you getting coaching qualifications? Were you back on the farm? Were you running the businesses? How are you keeping busy?
Yeah, so many jobs that I've already alluded to, but basically trying to make a living, developing a family, adapting to life after rugby, playing a bit of cricket. I actually started coaching immediately, became a New Zealand resource coach. And I was probably coaching before I gave up playing, just courtesy of playing for a country club and helping that team to function and enjoyed that side of it, supporting your teammates to do better. I found that rewarding. So I started coaching a schoolboy combination, a Colts combination, and then ultimately the Canterbury Country Seniors. So I was coaching through that period, even took a couple of coaching courses, not with the intention of coaching professionally, but just because I was interested in it.
So when did that change?
1997 was the first year I was actually paid to coach, so to speak. And that was the Canterbury NPC team. We actually won the comp that year, but I thought at that point, I honestly thought, well, I'll be doing this for 1 year, so I want to maximise my chance. I accepted the role of managing the Crusaders with Wayne Smith and Peter Sloan, thinking that'll expose me to the playing group, that'll help with understanding how the mindset of professionals is different from amateurs. Unfortunately, it wasn't too different, but we were able to also shape that group. So we won the NPC in 97, came sixth in Super, then we went back-to-back champions with the Crusaders, and now I took over as coach of the Crusaders. So I went from managing to coaching. Smithy went to the All Blacks, and we won again, and went from there.
It's a weird way in. As manager, what did that role involve? Because, you say manager, like I manage the teams here, and I'm nowhere near the playing field, and I make sure I'm not. But I guess it was different for what you were doing.
Obviously, some different requirements in terms of off the field, but I was supporting the group on the field, and I was coaching them. It was basically the same group of people in both competitions. So it was pretty easy. I was on the sideline managing replacements and communicating. And yeah, it was great. But most importantly, what it allowed me to do, because it was in the early days of professional rugby, the Crusaders were stone cold last in the first year. And then we got involved because we didn't enjoy the fact that Canterbury was suffering in both comps, a very proud traditional province. So we wanted to see them return to their former glory. So, and ultimately we were able to do that quite successfully. In fact, the Blues probably haven't recovered yet, but they're getting a little bit closer with the help of a good Crusader and Leon McDonald.
Yeah, I guess that's such a big part of New Zealand rugby particularly, is that sort of pride in your province, pride in your region, and determination to see it do well. I guess it drives sport quite a lot.
Yeah, and when the game went professional, they got a little bit confused around what was important. I think selection, they started looking more at talent than what had been the point of difference forever, which is teamwork and meaning. And that side of it concerned me a little bit, the impact of professionalism. But I only got to look at the performance of the Crusaders now, and it's not the best resourced outfits that are winning competitions. It's still those same point of difference elements that were prevalent in our playing era, amateur era. And long may that be the case.
Yeah, those roots you put down have stayed and kept the tree alive and producing, I guess.
Yeah.
So when you moved into coaching, you said, you've come in and Crusaders were dead last. So I guess a couple of questions rolled into one. What did you immediately like and dislike about being in that coaching role, and what were the early struggles you had to overcome?
I guess I had to get past myself in the first instance because, as a young coach, you come in very much with the playing mentality, where you come in, with that mindset of wanting to win, and it can actually get in the way, where you have this idea that it's about catering for that need, when in actual fact, over time, you let go of that a little bit more and you become a little bit more player-oriented and understand that's not about you, it's actually about them and the experiences that they have and their, success, ideally. So you're there to help them to thrive, more so than to just produce an outcome. If you're not in that space, then you just won't achieve the sort of longevity of performance that you aspire to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a chat with one of the cricket coaches that we've worked with from Australia. He's coached a high level in Victoria. He's over in England at the moment. And I remember asking him, he was working with the Victoria team and they'd just won the Shield that year. And I asked him if that was a career highlight. And he was just like, for him, he kind of stopped at his tracks by the question. He's like, well, if a team wins, does that make me the best coach in Australia? And if a team comes last, does that make me the worst? It doesn't really work like that. He goes, I'm much more satisfied when I'm working with a batter who takes something that we've worked on, uses it and succeeds with it. That's where he said he got the most satisfaction. Is that kind of similar to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about the trend. Which way are you heading with individuals, with the team as a group?
People get lost in the results, don't they? And focus so much on the result.
There's a subjective analysis from those who are external to the process, who have a different set of judgments, if you like. But that's where it's really important as a coach, particularly a career coach, to be well motivated, to understand your reason for being and make sure that you cater to that and don't get in the way of those that need you the most.
Yeah. So then you said how you've walked into Canterbury and it was, the team wasn't going so well. When you walked into the Wild Knights, they just come off the back of a double. So different environment coming into, but these two...
Right.
Oh? Wikipedia's lying to me.
That's not true, actually. When I walked in there, I came in as a consultant, first of all.
Okay.
And they won for the first time since 2010. But the truth be known, I'd been doing some consultancy with these guys from way back in 2005.
Oh, really?
The GM who was coaching at the time invited me up to a camp on the Gold Coast. And it was an experience that I really enjoyed. I sort of went there thinking, well, I was going to help them. On reflection, I realised that the whole experience had actually been very good for me as a coach. Because of the challenge of the language, it made me realise the importance of being succinct, the importance of not giving them too much information, but most importantly, targeting the information that you want them to retain and making sure that that's what you achieve. So I learned the importance of asking more questions as opposed to just telling. And so over a period of time from 2005, they were senior Wild Knights then, but they used to send players and coaches down to me when I was at the Crusaders initially, then the All Blacks, then subsequent to that, the Wallabies. So I'd retained the connection. And obviously when I finished up with the Wallabies, the Jimmo, who then became the GM, got in touch with me and asked me if I wanted to commence up there. And so I consulted the first year we won, and then became full-time, and we won back-to-back after that. We won 3 in a row at that point.
Yeah, I remember it well. It's when I just got here as well. So yeah, I mean, these are two pretty big sort of successful dynasties, basically, the Crusaders and the Wild Knights. Have you got similarities from the two environments? Have you managed to, I mean, the Wild Knights seem to be, I mean, they're both successful outfits already, but certainly it's been 5 and 8 years now that you've won here?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, not surprisingly. And I really enjoy the group. They're now the Saitama Panasonic Wild Knights, but I really enjoy the Wild Knights because we've got a really good group of people, good group of men, and that's where it starts and finishes. And they get it. They understand what the game's all about. Some of them are international, some of them are very high profile, but they've remained themselves. They're good characters, they give back. So we've got good people, common purpose. They understand the importance of teamwork and the meaning behind it all, the meaning being part of something that's bigger than yourself, part of the community, and the responsibility that you have to the next generation. Yeah,
I mean, that's a heavy message that we push on our players as well. It's slightly different when they are all amateurs, and that's something I've got for you in a minute. But
and understanding that their time in the game is finite and it will end. But the most important thing is, so what do you leave behind? What's your footprint? What's your impact been on those that encounter you or observe you play, or the next generation of kids? Is it something that they'll aspire to? And they get that. And the new facility that's been built, which you took a look at just before I came away, is designed with that in mind for it to become part of the community, so that it's a living thing.
Yeah, and it becomes, pretty special to be involved with as well, right?
Absolutely. It's a great place to work, working every day with people that care and understand that it's a privilege, not a right. And this senior group that we have, fantastic to that end. So it becomes self-fulfilling because they influence those that arrive into the place. And it just helps the young men who become professionals, who there are a lot of distractions, and may arrive thinking it's all about them and what they bring, or the first thing they do is they buy a flash car, and because they think they're coming into something that's going to last forever, but it doesn't. Yeah, there is an opportunity in terms of reward, but it doesn't cater for you for the rest of your days. So look, it's a great place to go to work.
Yeah, so we've talked a bit before about, culture and the importance of it. And it does sound like now where you've got to with the Wild Knights is that it's kind of player-led, that culture.
Correct.
But I'm going to assume it wasn't always that way.
Culture's talked about a lot, but often not understood, I think, by the commentary in the media. Culture is essentially what is there when you are not as a designated leader. So when you walk away, what happens? So culture is what your people and what happens at your place routinely when nobody's watching. That's your culture. It's not what you present or an idea that you have. It's the way it's lived by the minute, in particular when nobody's watching. And from a coaching perspective, for us, it's about empowering your group to get into that point of understanding and delivery. So we just facilitate that. But at the end of the day, we don't own it, baby.
How much time did you have to put into that when you first arrived?
It's every day. It's every minute of every day. The moment you button off, and a big slide starts with a small slip. So it's our job to, we have lots of conversations, particularly at the entry point every year, because every year is a unique group of people, and you're only together for that short period of time. So you can't presume, you can't take things for granted. You've got to keep referring to what works, why it works, how they would like it to be, how they would like to input or adapt what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, it's solely as good as what they make it. So you got to engage your people. It's not about telling; it's about everyone having those conversations and then getting on with
it. Yeah, absolutely. Now you're a man who I know likes to get out of his comfort zone and take on tricky roles. You left what was a highly successful, and I guess by the time you left, probably quite a nice and easy role to be having at the Crusaders, to go to Australia, which I suspect was not such an easy role. And then you came to Japan. Obviously, you've talked a little bit about how the Japan thing happened, but what was the main reason behind leaving the Crusaders and taking on the Wallabies job?
Just the challenge, really. I was ready for it. And as tends to happen, once you start looking, or to put it with more easily understood analogy, once you've driven somebody else's vehicle, you're often not very happy going back to yours if it's not as good.
Yeah,
So
right.
I started contemplating the prospect of international rugby. I've been encouraged to apply for the All Blacks role, missed out. And once you start looking, you start seeing, and it was an itch, I guess. I'd been lucky enough, I'd had a dozen years at the Crusaders by then between managing and coaching. Had won 7 times through that period. I remember a player actually won the first couple of titles were down the back of the bus, and he let me know he was going to France the next year, which caught me by surprise. But he turned it back on me and he said, well, surely you were going somewhere soon. Now, what more can we do? We've won the NPC, we've won Super Rugby a couple of times. There's nothing left to do. My comment at that point was, well, what's wrong with doing it again? I guess by the time 2008 had come around, I had 7 winning tankets on my desk. And it started contemplating an international role, and also felt that it was time to pass the baton. There were some former players that were starting to coach, and I thought, well, yeah, I shouldn't be greedy. I've been lucky. And the idea of a fresh challenge was appealing.
And you still did what, 4 years with the Wallabies? 5?
5, I think it was. Yeah.
I mean, certainly these days, that's pretty long.
Yeah.
And
believe it or not, I think I'm the longest serving Wallaby coach. Don't tell anyone. But it was great. It was challenging. It was demanding. The hardest thing was, and I knew it at the point of entry, was it was no win from my perspective, because I knew that, and we did okay. We were second in the world for 3 years running. I don't give anything to be that now. But the issue was the All Blacks were first. And so I was a constant danger of Australia. That New Zealand was ahead. And it was generally no win. If the Wallabies won, then no one domestically I was going to be happy. If the All Blacks won, then no one in my gig was in Australia was going to be happy. So from a personal perspective, it was probably a daft option, but it was one that was invigorating. It was great for me personally. It grew me. As a family, we really enjoyed it. And our 3 kids are all still living in Sydney. So those are decisions that you make in real time. You get on with it and you keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, okay, your next port of call was Japan. You've outlined a little bit already how that came about, but what were your first impressions of Japan? I mean, when was the first time you actually came here?
Oh, gee, I couldn't even answer that accurately. But I've been up there not only doing spot coaching with the Wild Knights, but I'd also done a bit of work with the Away son of Tokyo Uni, who went on to win 10 titles in a row. So I've been exposed a lot to the game. And what I enjoy about the game in Japan is there's a purity to it. You only got to look at the way the companies tip in to the game to understand the passion that there is for the game within Japan. They understand what it offers, the teamwork element, and they want that translating over their companies. There's a real positivity to the way they play. Yes, there's also, for want of a better word, a repetitive nature, courtesy of their work ethic. They've got ridiculous work ethics, and culturally, they've always been quite a prescriptive, top-down culture. So there wasn't a lot of encouragement for initiative, if you like, for individuals to think for themselves and self-determine. So that was, one of the challenges that I was confronted with, because that was part of my philosophy. Was very much, it's not about the coach having the answers, it's about the individuals in real time being able to self-determine and solve. But there was probably a historical fear of failure, if you like, courtesy of the prescriptive nature of their culture, of their workplace, of the order in the society, of their school environment, of their university environment. So that's probably the biggest challenge in advancing our group.
And how have you been able to do that? How have you been able to, I mean, I'm not going to say fix it, because I don't think you can fix it, but you've got to work around it, right?
You got to do what you say. You got to live that. If you want them to make mistakes, which is what I was encouraging them to do, have a go. And interpret failure as a positive, because to put it in a simple term, to lift a heavy weight, you have to fail in order to develop the strength to lift that weight. And that's the way it is with coaching and with the game, to develop and broaden your ability, whether it be in skills, in terms of time and space and execution, or whether it be in terms of decision-making, the degree of pressure. You've just got to expose them to a more challenging context and get better at it.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things I think we face with cricket is that, it's okay, I suppose, as a bowler, you got 6 deliveries and an over, but as a batter, one mistake and that's your game done. And you got a lot of time to then think about it as well. And guys, as you said, over here, we have it too at our level. You get certain players who are very kind of, cricket's their thing. It's the big thing in their life. And when it's not going well, they beat themselves up pretty hard.
Yeah. And the only way you can change that is to literally practice the opposite. So preparation is key. What you do through the week is what you see on the weekend. If you can't do it through the week, then you won't be able to produce it on the weekend. So we'd structure trainings to achieve the ends that we wanted. We want them having a go. So you design the rules such that they'd be rewarded for having a go and they'd learn and broaden through that. If you structure your trainings at a no-fail basis so that training looks perfect, but in the game they don't have what they need, then you're never going to get there. You've got to fail in training. And ultimately, the game becomes easy if you structure your preparation the right way.
We talked before, I remember one of our chats a few years ago about old way, new way was one of your messages. Do you want to just elaborate on a bit about that for the listeners and how that's been effective for you?
Sure. It was one of the best things I picked up, and it was quite late on before I left New Zealand that I was exposed to this concept. And it's basically how you can accelerate the learning process. So people talk about the 10,000 hours or 11,000 repetitions. There's lots of literature around learning, but the old way, new way accelerated the process because one of the reasons for slow learning is that often the athlete or the player lacks an awareness of the need to change or grow. So what you got to do is have them become aware in the first instance. So, and I used to use a cricketing example. A player who steps away to a short pitch delivery, he's often not aware that his first movement is back foot away towards square leg umpire until you show him on the video and he sees it. So as a coach, you can be talking and telling, and the player continues to do the same thing. Then you're going to recognize that you as the coach are the problem because your communication is not getting through. So doing the same thing, i.e. telling him that he's clearly not receiving, is the definition of lunacy. So we have to find ways to create the awareness. So in this particular example, what they did was that unbeknown to the batsman, put a brick behind his heel. Next short pitch delivery, he moved back, his heel kicked the brick, and he thought, what was that? Moment of enlightenment. And then he became aware, okay. And then he probably recalled all the dialogue of the coach. Okay. So I wasn't aware I was doing that. And then over time, you leave the brick there and then to the point where he adapts. But the critical thing is, okay, what's the old way? It's stepping back or whatever, contact with the brick, whatever. But they create the cue of what the old way was, which they're now aware of. And then you have the conversation around what's the new way. And it's, keep your heel in place or
stand still.
Whatever that solution is. So you identify what fills the void. It has to be solution oriented between the old way and the new way. And they must brand it in a way that when the bowler's approaching, they can be saying to themselves, they can be cueing themselves, feel what it might be the palms of your back foot, and describe it, that, feeling your big toe perhaps in your back foot. And through feeling your big toe, you control your big toe and it holds its ground, whatever. They can come up with whatever they like. I think the example I used in terms of language was separate. So the spelling of separate, if you ask a group of people how to spell separate, 50% will say SEPAR, ATE, and 50%
will spell it right.
Will spell it correctly. And then you ask them to identify the difference between, so then you can come up with your own explanation. It could be par in golf. It could be a rat. But they identify it, and that's their cue. So whenever they get to spell separate, they go, par, okay. And they've got the solution. It's not, don't do this, stop doing this, which is where an inexperienced coach will live. And what they're not able, because they're actually highlighting the problem, not the solution. We need to create what fills the void, what caters for their needs, and then they own it and they apply it and live it. And you can accelerate that learning from 10,000 to hopefully 10 minutes.
And is that something that you've had particular success with over here? Japan is a place where,
Absolutely.
Then yes, problem solving is
Players are often in denial.
Yeah.
And as coaches, we can see it, but it's of no value unless they can see it and feel it.
Yeah.
There's lots of literature around this stuff. There's a great golf book, you'll know the title, where they talk about you watch a player shot and then you go in and you say, right, if you do this, do that, change this grip, you'll be good. But in actual fact, it might have absolutely nothing to do with the sensation that they're feeling, so that they don't own the solution. So it may not cater for their needs. Yeah. So it's about empowering your people and giving them what they need, and they own it, and then they drive it, and you get a much better chance.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned before about your early experiences in Japan and the language barrier and how that helped you become more succinct with your messaging. Is it still the same? The language barrier doesn't go away, right? I mean, you and I have been in Japan pretty much the same amount of time. I suspect our Japanese is still equally terrible. But you're obviously getting your message across. So is it just a case of how you get the message across is almost more important than what you're saying sometimes?
That was really important. Yeah. So the other skill that I learned way back when was VARC, visual, audio, read, write, kinesthetic. We all have preferences in the way we learn. So to know your people and understand if you're struggling with them, to go to their receptors that are their strongest in. So it might be, a conversation, might be send them a note, it might be have them do it, it might be show them a video. There's many in different ways. And we, as coaches, we've just got to circle and find until that penny goes clunk, finds the spot. And we know even within English, mate, how challenging it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
How often we have misunderstandings. So across languages, it's really tough. But just being aware of that makes you better in your delivery. It makes you not presume, and it makes you check understandings, because it's like a pass. A pass isn't a pass until it's received.
Yeah.
The fact that you've sent it doesn't mean that you've made a pass. It's a successful receipt of that. So it's talking and hearing and checking those understandings.
Yeah, there's a fair few incomplete passes, I reckon. You and I have talked before about the importance of watching top level sport and how it can help develop your game. And maybe that's improved a little bit since we had that chat, but it's certainly an issue that we have cricket wise. Cricket's not that easily accessible, particularly for cricket. People they're just watching 2-minute YouTube clips and seeing every ball go for 6, and they think that's how they want to play. And it's not quite the way it works. But I mean, how important has that been for you and your group of players, getting them to watch top level rugby and to really understand the game?
Yeah, it's really important. And that's where technology is powerful and useful to make it accessible, to make your delivery around content really efficient. So, as we evolved, we gave them access to lots of footage, but as over time, we've got much better by exposing them only to the footage you want them to see, and in particular, focusing on what success looks like as opposed to what it doesn't look like. So you want to reiterate and reinforce the things that you seek, and to watch the best play is hugely powerful. So hopefully they'll make the connection. Okay, that's what coach was talking about. I see it there. And then they chase it. And so celebrating success within your own groups, whether it be through training or in game, find those occasions where they do the things that you seek and reinforce them. And then others will notice and observe and go, oh, okay, I get it. So you can learn from others rather than having to go through the pain yourself. And it just accelerates the group.
Yeah. So I was going to say 8 years that you've been here, but obviously it dates back a lot further than that now that we've had this chat. To 2005, you said you had your first kind of involvement in Japanese rugby. It must have changed a huge amount in that time. And even in the 8 years that you've been living here, what are the big differences that you see? And, what are you most happy about seeing, I guess?
Yeah, it's evolved enormously. And I do remember standing in the tunnel when I first arrived up here on a full-time basis and looking at the physiques of our blokes and realising we had an issue because the game was just becoming professional. Well, it had been professional around the globe for a period, but those disciplines and habits hadn't been translated into the programs here. Suntory were probably the first, courtesy of Eddie. He got them working in the gym. Toshiba was strong back in the day. They'd done that probably more through recruitment. That And standing in the tunnel, you could see the difference in the physiques between our mob and the others. And I was thinking, crikey, we need to address this. We played smart, but a group that plays smart and has the physiques is going to prevail.
Mm.
And that's been the biggest difference in the last 8 years, courtesy of exposure. There's a lot more coaches up here now, coaches that have international and Super Rugby experience. And that translates some rules being exposed to Super Rugby and the players being exposed to that competition and then bringing those mindsets and habits back to the domestic teams has also impacted. It's a cumulative effect. So the company teams here now are strong. Our group could go toe-to-toe in Super Rugby. There's no doubt. I mean, the reality is that the top company teams are stronger than the Sunwolves combination that was put out. Because you got not only domestic players, but you've got international players added to that mix. So that's the biggest evolution has been the physics and the contact area in the game as a result.
Yeah, I think, what was it? I saw a quote from you just towards the end of the season about, was there 3 guys who've been nominated for IRB Player of the Year who've been playing in Japan? So, I mean, must be something to that. It's obviously, people aren't coming here for a holiday, are they? They're coming to play.
No, definitely not.
High level of sport.
A large number of players who are chosen out of the Japanese competition directly into international rugby now, domestically. And they're thriving. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So moving off the rugby side of things and back to the cricket, since this is a cricket podcast, how surprised were you to discover Japan cricket?
Yeah. I was very surprised, but very happy, actually. And particularly then once I've seen the development in your program over time, the investment that came in from ICC, the development of the facility there in Sano. It's fantastic. It's the equal of any around the world, to be honest. And then I was lucky enough to get a run.
Get a few games in.
An invitation, not as many as I'd like, but I suppose the game to our boys last year through COVID and isolation, we had to find new ways of stimulating them, and they loved it. We were washed out on the day we were due to play, but hopefully we'll get an opportunity to do something possibly later this year.
Plans afoot. We'll see what we can do.
And you've now got an indoor net, so you can help me with my cricket. So
rig you up to the bowling machine and get you working on your technique.
I've got more cricket ahead of me than behind me, I think.
Absolutely right.
Golden oldies.
So you worked and you still work with amateur players. You mentioned in your squad at the moment. Obviously, everyone in Japan is an amateur still in the cricket circle. We're still very much looking to do those things you just mentioned in terms of get players exposure to higher standards overseas, and maybe occasionally have players coming over here who can work alongside them. What advice would you give to an amateur cricketer in Japan who has those dreams of making it as a professional?
Yeah, just follow that passion, basically, and seize on opportunities. Expose yourself to knowledge, expose yourself to opportunities, challenge. So Ijima, who's our GM, some of our younger guys who are now established players like Horia, Inagaki, Yamada prior to that, Tanaka, Fumiaki at the Highlanders, they all got sent to play in Soma Pro, even before that, to play in club and sometimes Super Rugby level sport offshore. And it does 2 things. It develops the independence in the individual and their thinking, their ability to adapt and work within a different environment. And that comes back with them. It also exposes them to a different level of comp, so they come back with more ambition. But just, expose yourself to learning, basically. It's one element that I really enjoy about being up here, that amateur and professional mix. The other thing is the nationalities. So what rugby has done well in Japan is you've got your marquee players and development players who come across and play, and they rub shoulders with the players that exist locally, and everyone benefits.
Yeah.
But it just makes it a unique, stimulating environment.
Yeah, for sure.
And just the routines that you establish, and the fact that you have to adapt to the different circumstance of the individuals is good for everybody, to respect the backgrounds and to make an effort to make it work.
Yeah, definitely. I think we see this with a lot of our guys is the ambition is there, but it's knowing what to do and it's taking the responsibility and actually being really passionately driven to go out and exactly like you were saying before, do the stuff between the training sessions that ultimately makes the difference.
And, don't be happy with just being a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
Expose yourself. And I mean, what the Wild Knights have done, there's a great example of what's possible in terms of Japanese cricket. You look at out of Ota, and if most people around the world really knew where this whole thing started, it would blow their minds. They produced a globally competitive team out of a backwater, for want of a better word.
It really is. And now a facility that is, absolute tops.
Yeah.
So it's phenomenal what's been done.
Clamber over broken glass to be at.
Cool. Look, I finished all these podcast chats with a set of questions. We tend to go cricket specific first, and then I'll ask you a handful of questions on Japan as well. So putting your rugby aside and getting your cricket cap back on, we'll start with the best player you've played with or against.
That's a good question, actually. So back in the day, at the end of my schoolboy years, I was selected for the New Zealand secondary schools team. And in that team was Martin Crowe, but he was a lot younger. He was probably 15, where I was 17, perhaps. Seemed like a lot at that time.
Yeah.
But as you know, when you get older, a year or two
doesn't mean anything, does it?
I mentioned Richard Hadley earlier. I had the good fortune of playing against him reasonably frequently, courtesy of Country v City. I talked about the fixture at Luggett. We played against some pretty good players. So, I've been lucky, I guess.
Some handy players. What's the best thing that you've ever learned from a coach?
Well, the best thing from a cricketing perspective I learned from my father, actually, where one day he pointed out to me, which was quite enlightening at the time, which it shouldn't have been, was that if you can score one, you can score 100. I was getting starts, I wasn't ticking off. Typically, he was quite succinct and focusing me on what was important.
Yeah, absolutely right.
I ultimately had a cricket coach at school who was great around attitude, if you like, and his message was always that failure is an important part of progress. And the character that you build through failure, but cricket is one of those sports, particularly as I opened the batting quite a lot, and that has to be the ultimate character building experience, where you go out there, take guard, look around the field as though you could hit it anywhere, and then the first ball rattles your castle and you've got to walk all the way back. It tends to build a bit of character.
Yeah, I have had that experience. I haven't opened the batting too often. I wonder why. Favorite shot?
Preference was to get on the front foot. I was probably better on the front foot than the back. I used to like cutting, but front foot for whatever reason. I think courtesy of many throwdowns in my childhood always gave me great satisfaction.
What's your first thought after being dismissed?
It's something that I developed over time and got better at, but my first thoughts would now be, what part did I play in that? As in, did I actually create that? Had I earned that courtesy of my ignorance or whatever?
For the self-reflection.
Yeah.
Career highlight on a cricket field?
Probably that the New Zealand secondary school side I alluded to earlier. In one innings, I scored 158 with David Boone standing at second slip for Tasmania, giving me my family heritage. I can understand how he knew so much about my family. But interestingly, one of my cricketing highlights actually happened just a couple of years ago. I went back and I played in an over-60s tournament and got selected for the New Zealand over-60s team, and we played against Australia and beat them in a 3-match series. So
yeah, it must be quite
I'm
good
looking
fun.
forward to playing some more of those.
Yeah, I bet. Is there any particular loss that still annoys you?
There is one that sticks out, which I alluded to earlier, the Hawke Cup Challenge against Northland in 82. Brian Dunning, who you may be aware of, played for New Zealand, left-handed batsman, scored 121. And he was dead set out on a flat turning pitch, right arm off spin around the wicket, pitched on middle. He went back, hit him on middle just above the ankle. And the umpire, who was the father of the opening bowler, ruled him not out. And he went on to make 121. And they retained the trophy. So that's always grated me.
Always stuck in the core.
But another one that grated me was a league versus union fixture at the Sydney Cricket Ground. They beat us there one year. It was an invitation game. And they carried on like pork chops afterwards. So we were requested to come back and play the next year, and we got them. And I scored 53 not out that day. I took a snapshot of it on the SCG scoreboard because it was very unlikely to ever be repeated.
Yeah, good. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Any particularly amusing stories that you've had on the cricket field? Cricket is a sport that tends to lend itself to fairly comical moments.
Yeah, there's one that stands out, which probably wasn't really that funny, but at the time, and for everybody that was there, it's probably the first thing they'd cite, partly courtesy of the personality of the individual involved. But we had a fast bowler, is a very good team man, funny man, source of a lot of humour, feeling at first slip to a trundler, bloke who just rolled his arm over, didn't used to bowl a lot actually, but he trundled and let the ball go, and this character who shall remain nameless because he's now a TMO in Super Rugby, the batsman top edge one, and he was at first slip, looked good, his body position looked good, looked like he was focusing, did not move anything, and the top edge hit him right between the eyes.
Oh,
and he rolled back, still not moving, just retaining the same body position. It split him. There was a little bit of blood, but there was also a huge amount of humour. And it took us about 20 minutes to get the game going again, because every time this bowler ran in to bowl again, everyone would fall about laughing. He also actually, on another occasion, opened the bowling with that same wicket where I scored the ton I was talking about earlier. And obviously it was a flat track because he charged in for about 3 overs, never even looked like beating the bat. Finally, courtesy of batsman error, the ball went past the blade and was taken by the keeper. He walked all the way down to the batsman, and we thought, crikey, this is going to be interesting. What's he saying here? We thought it was going to be a bit of aggression. And his message was, just hold it there, buddy. I'll hit it.
Yeah,
funny man.
Bring out some characters, isn't it? What's your favourite format of cricket? Are you a long format man, or do you like the T20 stuff?
Yeah, I'm a traditionalist. I enjoy all of them, to be fair, but I love Test cricket.
Yeah.
And even in my playing time, that Hawke Cup experience I had was fantastic because it was won on first innings.
Right.
So, everything mattered.
Yeah.
And we had some great contests courtesy of that. And Test cricket is like that. And we're getting results now. The game was transformed, obviously.
Mm.
I recall when the Australians changed their mindset in one-day cricket around the first 15 overs, they attacked, and it just changed one-day cricket. And now, IPL and so forth is now influencing what's possible in Test cricket, and it's great. But the nature of Test cricket is the ultimate, and for me, it always will be.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a couple of teammates there. Do you have any particular teammate that you enjoy playing with, even now when you go back and play in these over 60s? Does anyone think, yeah, looking forward to playing with that guy?
Yeah, well, I won't get the occasion again because he's just passed recently, but my brother was my favourite teammate. We played rugby together and cricket. In fact, that Hawke Cup challenge I talked about against Northall, the off spinner took a bag full, and we were at silly mid-off and silly mid-on, and we took 7 catches between us. He's just a competitor on and off the field, and he's great company.
Yeah, RIP. It was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? He passed away.
Yep.
Is there any one innings or bowling performance played by someone else that you watched and you thought, oh, wish I could have done that?
Yeah, well, I didn't even get to witness this innings, but I would love to have, and would certainly love to have done it because it was at Lancaster Park, which also no longer exists, courtesy of the earthquake.
Yeah, the earthquake, yeah.
Nathan Astle scored, I think it was 222 against England.
I watched that, yeah. I remember watching that vividly.
Remarkable.
It was ridiculous. And the last wicket stand with Danny Morrison of something ridiculous. And the headlines were that England couldn't get out the batsman who scored the most ducks in Test cricket. But yeah, Nathan Astle was just playing golf that day. I do remember that.
He could bat.
He could. Okay, I'll go on some Japan-specific questions since you're a man who's an old stager now in Japan. What's your favourite thing about the country, about living here?
I think you know the answer to this, mate. And I suspect it would probably be 70, 80 to 90% of most people's response. The food. Just love the food. It's changed the way Penny and I eat. We're much better for it. But the other thing I would say, and it's probably typical of most people's experience, but the order in the society in Japan, it's a very safe place.
Yeah, those are the two answers that come up on this all the time, is safety and food.
Yeah.
No, I mean, your kids were all at uni, I guess, by the time you moved here, right?
Correct.
But a lot of people say that, raising kids in Japan is just infinitely better than raising in whatever country that they're from. just, the nature of kids walking to school and everything like that. And do you have one favorite place that you go on holiday in Japan? I mean, during the pandemic, you were stuck here as much as anyone else was, right? So I guess you get a chance to travel around a bit.
Yes, it's a favourite opinion and mine. And even during the pandemic, that was the one place that we would go to just to brighten our days, was up to Karuizawa. It's a great destination. There's actually a coffee shop up there which won a global award a point in time, and it's magnificent.
Yeah, it's very chilled, that spot. So you mentioned the food. What's your favourite?
If I'm going to tell the truth, my favourite food is porridge, but my favourite Japanese food, but I'm not eating as much of it as I used to, as yakiniku. Yeah.
And have you been exposed to any particularly dodgy foods over here?
There's no such thing as a bad meal in Japan, mate. You're
all right with the guts and the natto and stuff like that?
To be fair, I'm not that comfortable. And the raw chicken, is it? I'm not that comfortable with it, but I have eaten it and it was good, but it's just the thought process that beats me.
Yeah, that's a common theme as well. All right, this will be a final question and a bit of a tester for you. Your favorite Japanese word or phrase and its meaning?
Yeah, I don't know if I should say this, but there's a word that comes to mind immediately, and I take some solace from the fact in checking before I offered this. I checked it online of the meaning. It's the word I've heard around the office, but it's always a source of a bit of humour because it's not flattering if you use it on anyone. But when I looked up the meaning, I was happy with the explanation. The meaning of the word is I did it. The word itself is yattana, which I think has less flattering connotations in terms of the...
I guess it's the context, right?
Understood, yes. Yeah. So it's like taking ownership of something that's just happened, and it's not necessarily a flattering term, but it's very powerful, very effective.
On that note, I'll say thanks very much, Robbie. It's been great chatting. I really appreciate the time. It's run a bit longer than I was expecting. But no, really good to have a chat with all this stuff, and congrats on the most recent titles. And I'm sure there's plenty more to come.
Thank you, Alan. No problem, mate. I'll see you on the squash court.
Will do. Cheers, Robbie. That concludes a unique episode of the Japan Cricket Podcast. My thanks again to Robbie for giving up his time, and I hope you enjoyed his stories about cricket, rugby, coaching, team culture, and everything else in between. It was one of the most memorable chats I've had in doing this, and I really am extremely grateful to Robbie for giving up his time. If you are new to the show, then please do go and check out some of the episodes in Series 1 and 2. There's lots of great tales out there and insights into the sport in Japan from people with their own unique stories. Most importantly, though, go and give the Instagram page a follow at the Japan Cricket Podcast in case I get another guest on that you're interested in. And of course, leaving a review on whatever platform you get your podcasts would really help other people to find the show. Thanks as always to BRB Munde for providing the backing music. Go and check him out on Spotify if you like what you hear. And additional thanks to Nick McCorriston, who's helped out on editing this episode. See you next time, and arigatou gozaimashita.